Okay, now that the semester's over and I have more free time, and I actually haven't been able to use this room for videos in months. That's kind of why I haven't been making videos. But I'm going to finish up this theory I was going to do a long time ago. I should have had done already. This book that we read for class. I got an A in the class, by the way, for 100. Moral issues. I might tutor it next year. The next chapter is Utilitarianism. Which I'm assuming, given the nature of my videos, that most of my subscribers, most of you watching this, already know what utilitarianism is. If you don't know what it is, basically it's the idea that, like, what do humans want? What really is morality? Or what really should morality do? And their end result is it should increase happiness. It should increase pleasure. And because morality ought to be impartial, you know, it should apply to everyone. There doesn't seem to be any reason why it should be different for some and not others. Morality should be about, or not really morality in general, but more like criterion for deciding action, deciding what to do in certain situations. The goal should be the greatest happiness, the greatest pleasure for the greatest number. And basically that's the thing. And then the trick is, of course, what is pleasure? Pleasure is like contentedness, feeling good. And this book brought up two very interesting, different views of pleasure. Bantham's idea of pleasure was that pleasure is always just contentedness, and that there isn't different types of pleasure. That all pleasure is the same. Like he said that push pen is the poetry, and push pen is darts, pretty much. It's British version of darts. And Mill had another idea. He thought that pleasure came in categories. Romantic, intellectual pleasure is higher than the pleasure you get playing video games. Like other various types of addictive, potentially dangerous types of pleasures. You know, like there are objections that he cites in the book. One of them is something like, if you're in the South, black guy killed somebody, the people want to lynch somebody, so they just grab a random black guy that you know is innocent and say he did it, and they're going to lynch him. The utilitarian would say that you should lie and say he didn't do it. So, the utilitarian should say, even though that you know this guy is innocent, even though you know he's innocent, you know he didn't kill anyone, you should say that you saw him kill the person, so that they lynch the black guy and the innocent guy, so that the lynching stops, so no one else gets lynched. Because they're kind of lynching, they kind of just randomly lynch people until they find the guy that they for sure were the lyncher. So you should do this because it'll, overall for all of society, increase happiness. The utilitarian defense is basically to say, well, in that case it's not really good to lie because, you know, you can get caught. The real murderer is still out there murdering people, and then when it's figured out that you lied, well, you're in deep crap, and you might make the lynchings even worse. You might just lynch more people, make everything worse. So that's the problem with that, of course, is it's justifying. It's a defense on utilitarianism that doesn't use that. It's sort of trying to defend utilitarianism on common sense grounds almost. Trying to say, oh no, you still shouldn't lie because lying is bad for utility. But that's the thing, it's still sort of defending common sense in a way, because it's making a rule, because it still seems like there's instances in which lying would be good for utility, so it's putting lying above utility, so it's still a cop-out, a compromise with common sense morality. Common sense morality is basically what the majority opinion morality, and it usually has to do with instincts and stuff and feelings. The other one is basically like utility. This means that you can do exemplary punishment, where you punish an innocent person too much, or you punish someone who did something bad too much to stop other people from doing it, stuff like that. And utilitarianism would is wrong because, you know, you have to break common sense notions of justice and stuff like that. So my view is I need more than that, and that's the problem. This is a introduction. This class is a 100 level class, hence why I got an A in it probably, and the fact that I read this book like, I don't know, like 6 times. I read this thing so many times, which it's only that then, not hard to read that many times. And we didn't get the last chapter, the last 2 chapters really, the virtue ethics and the feminist ethics, which I'll go over in my 300 level class on ethical theory. But basically, yeah, I mentioned this to one of the tutor for the class, and he didn't want us to go into it too much because it was 300 level, and you know, we have a very limited time in the tutoring area. But basically my thought was, that's not good enough argument against utilitarianism to say, well, it doesn't hold up to justice. The problem is because it's almost like saying utilitarianism is wrong because it's not. It's because there's other views out there, and we like the other views more. Like I would need something more concrete than the book's attacks on utilitarianism. It might be possible that the author is biased because the author is a utilitarianism. Wow, sorry, that was a tongue slip. The author is a utilitarian, not a utilitarianism. Yes, he is a utilitarian, very much so. Rachel's, and I think his father was utilitarian as well, but I'm not sure. So that might bias his opinion a bit. That might possibly make it to where the attacks against utilitarianism that he gives are not so great. Let's see. But his defenses are great. One of his defenses is basically. Oh yeah, let me go over the one. I'll skip the rule. There's this thing called rule utilitarianism, and it's crap because mainly you could just always just comment underneath my video if I'm wrong, but it just sounds like you could just make up. You can either it's wrong. Rule utilitarianism fails because on the one hand you either make rules and eventually you have to follow the rule rather than follow utility in a particular action, which makes it rule worship, which makes it basically Kantianism. But rule utilitarianism is basically utilitarianism isn't about finding what to do in a specific situation. Utilitarianism is about finding the best rules that create the most utility. But yeah, the rule worship problem, or you could just, the other problem is that you could just make any rule you want to fit the situation, in which case it's just act utilitarianism. So it's not really a good defense of utilitarianism, rule utilitarianism, because it either goes nowhere or turns into Kantianism. Contrary to what objectivists out there say, Kantianism is all about absolute, objective, 100% uncompromising ethics. That's the whole point of Kantianism. Kantianism is, let's create a moral theory, let's create lots of moral rules and axioms and never break them ever. That's basically the gist. But yes, on to the defense of utilitarianism that I think is great, which is if you do have this book, it's in your library, it's on page 120, and it's basically common sense is wrong, which is basically like the problem with common sense is that common sense morality is often based off of gut reactions, you know, like, oh, I feel this is bad, oh, I feel this is good. I mean, like, you wouldn't apply that to science, would you? You wouldn't say, I feel this is true and this isn't true with science. So that's one problem with common sense morality and why you can't trust it too much. Which common sense morality, to reiterate, is basically it's usually what you feel is right or wrong, or what your society sort of inculcated into you what is right and wrong. So yeah, you shouldn't rely on it. So even though if you feel something's wrong, that doesn't mean it's wrong. If you feel something's right, that doesn't mean it's right. And that's one defense of utilitarianism. My one defense, there's actually 3 parts to this common sense is wrong defense of utilitarianism. And the one I like is that most of our values have utilitarian bases. So don't kill. Well, makes sense, because it'd be very difficult for majority of society, for anyone really, to be happy if it's seen as okay to kill without punishment. Like if it's okay in your society to kill someone and there isn't police or security or the victims of the victim's family, I mean, because the victims can't do anything, the dead, but the friends and family of the victims, they're not supposed to do anything, then it seems likely that people are going to kill quite often, and this would be very bad for utility. Also, if everyone lied all the time, it would be bad for utility. Even though it's okay to lie sometimes, if it's good for utility overall. It's also our values, like infanticide. It wouldn't be good for society's overall happiness if infanticide happened too much, if it wasn't seen as a little taboo. Mainly because there's a moral psychological part where if you let parents kill their babies, then their moral psychology isn't so great, they might go kill people otherwise. Moral psychology basically is like your brain is hardwired, has some hardwired morality into it. This might sound like common sense, but it's not based on feelings so much as just like sanity. So like part of moral psychology says that like someone who's mentally ill would harm children, and animals would harm animals and stuff like that, and the more they're allowed to do these things, the more their moral psychology twists, and more they might become more dangerous to other people. Which is why hunting just seems weird to me. I'm not a big fan of hunting. I see hunting to eat, like hunting to learn how to survive, hunting to learn survival skills if you need them. I can see that, but just like if you hunt and then you leave the body out there, you're a jackass. That's my opinion. Or if you hunt and you don't eat any of it, or you just hunt it and then like decapitate it and put the head on your wall, and you like just leave the body out there, you're a jackass. That's my opinion. Yeah, basically, it's our values, and most values are based on what will create the most happiness for the most people. So yeah, that's I like those defenses. Now there are a couple of pretty good arguments against it. The other arguments against it were crappy in my opinion, but there are a couple that, at least on the surface, seem like good arguments against utilitarianism. Like one would be, okay, if I spend this $5 to buy a cheeseburger, I won't get as much happiness as if I were to give a homeless person $5 and they bought themselves a cheeseburger. A cheeseburger would create more happiness for a homeless person than for me, so I should do it. But if you take utilitarianism seriously, then that means I should never buy cheeseburgers, because the happiness wouldn't be enough. So I should, if I really believe in utilitarianism, then I should have just enough money to survive and give the rest away, like some kind of slavish, non-independent being. Which I see where that argument comes from, and I guess that's kind of why I like utilitarianism, but I like to throw in a little bit of that Ayn Rand feel I had back when I was an objectivist. So I've heard that this is crazy, but I do like to kind of mix ethical egoism and utilitarianism together. So in this case, I would, because I think they're two opposing opposites that when you put together, they sort of they equal out almost. It's like sort of a mutual interest. My interest and everyone else's interests matter, but my interests do ultimately matter. In this case, I would say my happiness is very important to me. My happiness is very important, a little bit more important than others, I'd almost say. Although I do believe other people's happiness is very important as well. I'm still going to do things that make me happy, even if potentially I can make others happier if I gave more. It's still my life, and my happiness is very important to me as well. And that's my thought on it too. And another thing, it wasn't mentioned in class because I don't think there was enough time, and it would just be too difficult to bring it in. I think I mentioned it, but I'm done with the chapter. This is sort of my view on utilitarianism now. But yeah, I read in political philosophy class last year Robert Nozick's Anarchy, State, and Utopia, and he talks about if you want to know where it is, you know where he talks about the Kantian principle. Well, he talks about this idea like around that area. The Kantian principle, by the way, is the whole don't treat people 100% as tools. You have to respect them as people, basically. But the other argument is what's called the argument from separation, which basically says society as a whole doesn't have pain and pleasure. Only individual people recognize pain and pleasure, which, okay, yeah, sure, I think most utilitarians would accept that, but the implications are very important. What this means is that you can't, if you have a group of 100 people, and it would make 90 people better if they killed 10 of the people, it's not a matter of there's this one entity just added on to its tally of pain and pleasure 10 points, it added on to the pain, the 10 people dying, and then added on pleasure to the part of the entity's pleasure meter, and because it was more pleasure for this group, then it's great, fantastic. No, the group itself doesn't have a pain-pleasure phenomenon. Even if you would add up all the individual happiness increases of the 90 people, it's still a little suspect, because and this is my sort of ethical egoist, so I guess you could say it's my ethical egoist justification of rights, in a way. In a way, yes, in a way, no. Because rights is a whole different, another boondoggle, a whole other mess. Basically, the 10 people have their own happiness and pleasure meters, and you shouldn't kill those 10 people off for the majority, because you should sort of respect each individual person's pursuit of happiness, or their own pain-pleasure monitors. So, in my opinion, by killing them, it's an infinite number of. You're minusing all their potential pleasures, and you're also not respecting their sort of egoist right to pursue their own pleasure, pursue pleasure in their own lives. So after you really consider that, the potential happiness of the 90 isn't great enough. The only way I might disagree is if it's something like you have to kill the 10 people or all 100 people die. Okay, then maybe. But if it's something like that just 90 people are evil bastards and they would find it funny to kill off the 10, no, you have to respect the egoist equation of their happiness being important, their own personal happiness is factoring into it, rather than only considering the group's happiness. Now it goes both ways, of course, because it has to equal out. Sort of avoid coming off as just a rebel of, oh, screw the group, I do whatever I want. I have to do this for the sake of consistency and flip it around a bit and say that sometimes the happiness of one, sometimes the happiness of the 10 doesn't outweigh the happiness of the others. So let's say that the 10 now are the aristocracy, 10 aristocrats, the 90 are the serfs, and the pursuit of pleasure and happiness of the 10, if they're in the extreme detriment to the happiness and pursuits of